Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the LitRPG podcast. I am Ramon Mejia. I'm here to bring you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and of course author interviews. This week I have 3 new reviews for you. I know it's not a lot, but just getting back from Dragon Con, super tired, and just had a little bit of time. But several of the books are like really long, so I think they should count as double, at least. But anyways, 3 new reviews in this week. That includes The Fifth Realm, not a tiny book. And after that, it'll be Ethria. That's how the author asked me to pronounce it. Ethria, The Pioneer, an epic LitRPG adventure. Also not a tiny book. And last but not least, it'll be Darkness Named, Darkness Online book number 1. But before we get into any of those reviews, we're of course going to go into LitRPG news. And in a little bit of news, we're just going to start right off with one of the bigger stories of the last couple of weeks. Michael Scott Earl. He was banned from Amazon with some very weird circumstantial evidence and no evidence at all and no real reason given. So he actually took them to court. He took them to court and he fought. And last week we got a result on that. Unfortunately, the result came after I recorded last week's podcast. So that's why you're hearing about now. But basically, he lost the court case. The judge decided in favor of Amazon and their ironclad contract. Michael Scott himself posted in one of his private fan groups that even though the result was not what he was hoping for, he still felt good about it since he got to be able to fight back a little bit even and be heard. He's not going to stop writing, however, and he already has plans in place to continue to publish and to produce, even if it's not on the Amazon platform. To that extent, Michael Scott has actually already started selling all the books he's already written, the ones that were taken off Amazon, through BookFunnel and through his website at Michael Scott Earl. It's michaelscottearl.com. We'll have a link in the show notes for you. You can actually go there and click on any of his books and the title on the top part, and it'll give you a list of all of his books, and you can click on them and you can see them by series and buy them. You'll be buying them through BookFunnel, so you might have to create an account there. But they're there. A lot of the first books in the series are free. That's always great. It can give you a nice chance to get introduced to a series before you go into like 7 or 8 books, which is kind of the idea. But you can purchase them. I know a lot of fans of his works are actually purchasing everything all at once, all the back catalog, just in case something weird and negative happens again. And so they're spending hundreds of dollars all in one shot just to get everything. And again, this is all the stuff that was previously published on Amazon that just disappeared. So you can grab that there. I know Michael Scott also has plans to start a Kickstarter or some other crowdfunding platform in which to produce new works or to fund their production and let the fans kind of decide what he's working on next. He also has a catalog, of course, of things that he's been working on that I'm sure he's going to gradually be publishing and through his own website, in which case he'll probably be making a nicer percentage since he doesn't have to split it with Amazon or another platform. But still, if you've been waiting to get back into his series or to buy his stuff, you can go to his website again at michaelscottearl.com and go grab all of his things. There are details on his Facebook page and his fan author group, Michael Scott Earl's Very Cool People or something like that, in which he gives more details about some of the things he's planning to do, including the Kickstarter goals that he's kicking around with his fans to see what they want for those stretch goals. And some of the ideas are really pretty cool, including reproducing audiobooks. Since he can't sell new stuff potentially on Amazon, he'll have to find a new platform for that as well. But he does plan to, again, continue producing audiobooks for people who want those as well. But again, it might be delayed or have new narrators, unfortunately, just because Amazon issues. But he actually said in his notes that he does plan to re-record anything that gets a new narrator so that it's all uniform throughout the entire series. So all kinds of good stuff there. Okay, on to our next bit of LitRPG news. We have Michael Chatfield announced this week that he's been working on not only new books for everybody, but an actual RPG game called Dark Envoy. It's still in the works. It is a tentative release date on Steam for 2020. No month. Dark Envoy is a non-linear RPG inspired by the likes of Divinity series, XCOM, and Dragon Age to offer free world exploration with an emphasis on tactical combat layered with lore and strategy. So this seems like it's a tactical RPG game of the kind of Final Fantasy Tactics and XCOM. So if you're into that kind of series, feel free to go check it out. I mean, Michael Chatfield is an amazing author in his own right, so it's really fun and interesting to see that he's getting into the game industry, even if it's like doing dialogue stuff or whatever he's doing there. But definitely go support the author and his projects if you're a fan of his. So yay. In other LitRPG news, we have us. The LitRPG podcast was at Dragon Con this past week, which is why I look so tired and haggard. All that walking around was definitely killer on my old man knees now. But got to see plenty of vendors, got to hang out with fellow authors and fans, and see some of the panels that they were on, and I did my best to record everything for you folks at home who weren't able to come with us. And it was just so fun to meet so many fans and narrators and people. I recorded again as much as I could, and we're sharing it on Facebook and YouTube for the LitRPG podcast and the Geek Bites podcast, LitRPG YouTube page rather. And so definitely go check out the videos. We have links in the show notes for the ones I've already put up, including some of all the panels that I attended with all the authors. Some of the panels were not the best sound quality. I did my best to upgrade them. And some of the panels are a little, the clips I have are shorter just because I ran out of space on my devices, on my recording devices. But what I have is here, including some really good stuff from Michael Chatfield, Dakota Crowd, Apollos Thorne, who's the author of Codename Freedom, and who recently put out a book. He was actually on this weird little panel with Patricia Briggs. That Patricia Briggs. So it's interesting to see him. He's in the Delphic Oracle Club there. But all the panels were really fun and interesting. And some of them actually talked about LitRPG. So that was always fun for me to see. Okay, that's it for LitRPG news. On to stuff that is out now. Including Illusion by Joseph Phelps. Then there's also Metamorphosis, Grey Blood, book number 2. Also out is Endless Fantasy Online, The Phoenix Kingdom, also the 6th book in the Adventures on Brand series, the 1st book in the World of Karak Game of Villains series, which is new from that author, the 2nd book in the Iron Will series, Dragonheart, LitRPG Wuxia series. It's a book 2 in that series is out. Something new for Matthew Sieg, who is a very interesting LitRPG author. He always does this weird, quirky-ish stuff. I'm always look forward to reading his things. He has a new book out called Rule of Cool, Know Your Role. So we'll see how that turns out. Also, Codename Freedom, World West from Apollos Thorne is out now. I've already started it, and I'm already engaged in super into the story. Haven't read it, though. Haven't finished it, so no final review score yet. Also out is the 3rd book in the Arabella Online book series. That's all I'll say. All out is the 4th book in the Race Haunt series called Dungeon Lord Ancient Traditions from Hugo Huesca. I enjoy the series. A new book from Portal Books, Mastermind Titan Online, a superhero LitRPG story, is out. Also from Chris Snee is Queen of Nowhere, a LitRPG adventure. So all kinds of good stuff. Long list, mostly because I recorded it early last week, so I can attend Dragon Con. There's also more LitRPG audiobooks since last time I recorded, including The Player Plague, a superhero LitRPG adventure, book number 2. The 4th book in the Crystal Shards Online series called Gunblade is out as well. Idle System book number 4, out as an audiobook. The 1st book in the Enora Online series, didn't care for the ebook version, but hopefully maybe the audiobook version is better. That is out. The Crafter's Dungeon, a Dungeon Core novel. Really enjoy this one. Definitely go check it out. I'm sure the audiobook is good too. Mastermind Superhero Liberty from Portal Books, out as an ebook and an audiobook simultaneously, so good for you guys. And there we go. All the stuff that has come out recently, in the last 7 to 10 days since we recorded last. Okay, on to stuff that is out, coming out in the near future. Again, this is just a list where I read off things, so feel free to skip ahead. And that includes on September the 6th, Rhea Early Game, book number 2 in that series called Archon's Chosen. The 2nd book in the Khazarian Online series. The 1st book in the Blood of Fate series, World 99, written by Dan Sergolanoff, who's the author of the Level Up series. The 2nd book in Gloominess plus 2, Congregation. The 3rd book in the digital slow story series called Red Snatch will be out. Again, that's a humor-based LitRPG story with lots of cursing, a lot of adult humor, jokes and whatnot. So out on September the 10th. Then September the 15th, there'll be Gamer for Love, Alpha Rulebook number 8. That release, it is actually switched. I think it was supposed to be earlier, and the author shifted it to the 15th just because of editing delays. So we'll see it on the 15th of September then. On September the 17th, it'll be Bibliomancer. On September the 19th, Skulls of Atlantis. On September the 30th, the third book in the Shadow Sun series called Shadow Sun Rebellion. That's the post-apocalyptic real-life RPG story that a lot of people have really been enjoying, including myself. On September the 30th, the second book in the Darkness Online series called Darkness Found will be out. We're actually reviewing the first book in that series today. On September the 30th, there'll be Dark Legacy Transformation book number 3 in that series. On September at some point, hopefully, it'll be First Song book number 2 from Blaze Corbin and Outspan Foster. On October the 1st, Fairied, a Monsters and Maces and Magic book number 4. The second book in the Hero Online series will be out on October the 3rd. Varnoth book number 2 will be out, called The Black Blade, on October the 3rd. The Dungeon Dive from Ryan Vender will be out on October the 16th. It's a short story set in that series. The second book in the Bad Guys book series from Eric Luggin will be out on October the 17th, called Second Story Man. On October the 17th, Universe ICS book number 2 called Keymaster will be out. October the 21st, Dead Man's Retinue, NPC's Path book number 3. On October 23rd, the fifth book in the Reality Bender series called A Jump into the Unknown will be out. So I've actually really enjoyed that series. So we'll see how that one turns out in October. The Dark Path Grimdark LitRPG will be out on November the 1st. And November the 4th, it'll be the second book in the World of Karak series. And November the 7th, the second book in the Interworld Network book series. That's the one where the main character had like this tiny time jump power. It'll be out on November the 7th, called Avatar of Light. And November the 11th, The Last Time Loop, book number 1. So there we go. All kinds of stuff coming out in the near future. And now we're going to move on to recent releases and reviews. Okay, first out of the gate is going to be The Fifth Realm, the 10 Realms books number 5, written by Michael Chatfield. This is 731 pages, $5.99. It is not available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the novel description. After taking and defending Vosgul, Eric and Rugrat have a new task to complete: build a city. They have been racing through the realms at this point, but Vosgul is a prize they can't simply give up on. Alva is mobilized, as are their allies, to build out the new city. It is time that they solidify their gains, working on their crafts, their fighting ability, and cultivation. As they expand their personal power, their gaze turns towards Vermeer, to the dungeon. It's time that they get started to exert the strength they built up. Alva moves in the shadows, but to what effect? The answer lies in the Fifth Realm. Okay, much like the novel description, the review is short and sweet. Even though it took me about a month to finish the novel, it was a good read, on par with the other novels in the series. And I say it took me about a month because this came out last month, about this time, beginning of August. And I honestly put it down for a little while because I was reading the beginning portion of it, and a lot of that beginning section is cleanup of like plot lines and some administrative stuff, where the main characters, Eric and Rograt, kind of give up some of their control for their city management stuff, and it's necessary because it sets up the rest of the story, and that it's not focused on the two main characters trying to do everything themselves, including all that administrative work and training of like the standing army for Alva. Instead, what that does set up though is it allows the story to almost focus on multiple secondary characters in addition to the main two characters, giving them their opportunities to tell little stories. And it kind of makes this really novel, 731 pages, almost a collection of shorter interconnected short stories. And I think that does credit to it because it's still a very large cast, and most of Michael Chatfield stuff eventually turns into like really big cast member stuff with like dozens of secondary characters. And this one is really no different. But in this case, what the author kind of does is by letting the two main characters kind of go off and do their own thing sometimes, and he's able to turn back and follow some of those secondary characters and give them their little time frame in the story to do their own thing and follow them on the little short story adventures. And everything in the story is still very interconnected. There's nothing that goes off on its own weird little adventure. Everything kind of always ties back together, but I like the way that it did that. And once the novel actually gets into the first conflicts in the story, the entire thing goes by in a flash. But there was a period of time where I did put the book down just because of that first beginning section was a little rougher to get through. But once I got back past it to that first conflict, I was like, okay, this is what I remember. This is what I liked. And it was really enjoyable. And there's a lot of crafting in the novel still. There's physical, social, crafting, and economic conflicts in the story that were just really nice, along with the expected training and body cultivation and mana cultivation stuff. And there's just a lot of great things here that I've really always enjoyed. And the series, and except the novel, is on par with the things that came before it. The main characters don't spend a ton of time in the fifth realm, but that's completely understandable because it's not really a conflict realm necessarily, unlike the sixth realm, which is coming up. So that's why this is kind of a cool down book in a lot of ways. There's still definitely conflict. There's still dungeon diving in the Alva dungeon. There's conflicts galore in other ways that I thought were interesting and fun, and also just like a little bit different. So good thing there. Overall, though, like I said, it's an entertaining story. I don't want to give out too many spoilery details if you haven't read it, but it's been a month, so you probably have. But for me, enjoyable. Gets a score of 7.6 out of 10. That's the Fifth Realm, the 10 Realms book number 5, with a score of 6.5 out of 10. If you've already a fan of the series, you've probably already picked it up. But if you haven't, and you've been waiting for a review for some reason, I don't know why you would. But it's a good story. It continues on with the good things you probably enjoyed for the series. And next we have Ethria, the Pioneer and Epic LitRPG Adventure, written by A.R. Holloway. It is 598 pages. It is $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. And here's the author's description. Offered a choice by powers far greater than himself between returning home at great risk or entering a world named Ethria, where he might find another, supposedly faster path home, Daniel Rayed Tyr will enter Ethria, a world that operates similar to the video games Daniel has always enjoyed. Ethria is a place where power can be found in many forms, both light and dark, and whose true purpose is unknown even to most of its citizens. Taking the long way home, Daniel will make another choice: to help a group of persecuted people whose story mirrors that of his pioneer ancestors. But at a time when gods are changing, the people of every race suffer, the foundations of nations shift, and change and danger are in their very air. What can one underleveled foreign wizard do? All the while, at the roof of the world, at the base of the Sawtooth Mountains, a darkness grows. A creature plots, and an ancient evil from the foundations of the world seeks to re-emerge into Ethria. There we go. Not a bad little blurb there. Okay, this is a transported to an RPG world story that is a bit wordy. It is an entertaining read with some good, fun dialogue and world building. The story starts with the main character, Daniel, playing a game to establish his gamer cred, but with the 9% mark. He's in this new RPG fantasy world. Once there, he's there for the entire story. The big plot of the story is that the main character is supposed to help a couple of gods in this world by creating a place for their long lost descendants. However, the story doesn't really focus on that aspect past the initial setup sections. Instead, it's a little more slice of life in the fact that the main character goes off and he travels and he has a fairy guide he trains with, and he meets a bunch of fantasy people and societies and cultures. He gets into fights, he levels up, he talks a ton, but through that dialogue, you get to do the world building, the magic descriptions, and all that good stuff. But that's more of what it is, at least in the first half of the story. The first half is, again, the setup section of this novel. Again, it's a lot of slice of life adventuring, world building, loads of RPG and magic systems explained, and lots of dialogue. This is a dialogue heavy story. The last half of the story, however, is almost all combat. Not that there's not combat in the first half, but it's more of a minor thing. The second half, major thing, just tons of combat. The structure and the pacing of the novel probably could have used some more evening out, in my opinion, with a little more conflict sprinkled in the first half, which was a little dialogue heavy, and maybe some slower moments in the second half to do other things. But that's a minor point. Game mechanic wise, this is a pretty solid system. It's actually one of the things I liked about the story the most. There's loads of information about the RPG progression system, and while some of it's going to be familiar, there are a couple unique game mechanics that I thought were interesting, including some things related to the spell description and some negative consequences to spell descriptions that I thought were, or spell casting, that I thought were really nice, including some different stats that affected mental stability, and I thought this was a really interesting mechanic to introduce, and it gave this a different vibe than some of the things you might be just straight like D&D related kind of stuff. There are a couple places where I think some of the modified spells probably could have been set up better, instead of just like, oh, by the way, I made modifications with your spells, here's the results, without like the actual descriptions of the modifications necessarily. But beyond those things, the author really goes out of his way to make sure the story follows the system he set up, including, again, the negative consequences to spellcasting, which I always appreciate, in that when a system is set up, and an author follows his own rules, it makes the game mechanics feel like they're important, and they feel like they're as important as physics or like the magical rule systems that is in place. The author essentially doesn't try to bypass any of those things for story, which I always appreciate personally, just because that's one of the things as a gamer that you're used to, and that makes that grounds a story in something that's familiar, and that you can't always, without like, let's say have cheat codes. You just have to follow the rules, and you have to understand them to progress and to do well. And that's definitely a part of what the story is. One of the other things, like the part of the plot is about, the setup is supposed to be the main character is supposed to build this settlement for these people, right? So I kind of expected that there would be more town building. Unfortunately, it's kind of a minor aspect. So just as an FYI, I don't expect too much town building. There's a minor bit, but it's not like a super big part of the story that I thought it was going to be, considering that plotline. Overall, it's a rather good story, especially considering it's the author's first time publishing. There are a few minor, semi-regular spelling and grammar issues, but nothing that really ruined the story for me in any way, shape, or form, or really bothered me. But other reviews did note it. However, all that's more than outweighed by the things I enjoyed about the story, including the way the author made the game mechanics an intricate part of the story, the good snarky humor, and the good world building. Those are the things that I really enjoyed about the story the most. There may be a little bit too much dialogue for some people. Like I said, this is definitely a dialogue-heavy story, but there's also how the author does his character development, how he conveys his world building through conversations, and how he explains systems. So it's a part of the story. However, I like the way the author did all these other things so much that those are just minor things. For me, the novel gets a score of 7.5 out of 10. It would probably have gotten a little bit of a higher score without those other issues. But again, this is still a very good, solid story that I actually enjoyed quite a bit more than I was expecting to. So, yay. That's Ethria, the Pioneer, an epic LitRPG adventure with the score of 7.5 out of 10. And next is going to be Darkness Named, Darkness Online book number 1, written by Riley S. Keene, which is a husband and wife pen name. This is about 250 pages. I don't actually have an official page count, neither does Amazon at this point. However, the price tag is $4.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. And here's the author's description. In the False Lands, it's either get good or die. Tanisha Richards, known as Coest in Darkness Online, isn't your typical augmented reality mobile gamer. She's a deer hunting engineer from Oregon who lives in a self-sustainable house, but drives a really inefficient truck. She also happens to be in a wheelchair. When the loot of a lifetime shows up during a potentially bugged event, Tanisha rushes into the wilderness to capitalize on some intern's mistake. She was expecting some amazing drops. What she got was dropped into the False Lands. Will Tanisha be able to survive in a reality ruled by the system in Darkness Online, or is it GG, good game? There you go. Okay, this is a trapped in a game world story with a main character that has a disability. She can't walk and uses a wheelchair in the real world. She's sent against her will to her favorite augmented reality game where she kills monsters and crafts using their parts. And that's kind of what the story is. This story definitely has a more of a game-lit vibe than LitRPG, and while there are RPG elements with the main character gaining skills and levels, they don't really matter all that much to the story, but they do exist. So it is technical LitRPG. It's really never established in the game if this world has a respawn system, so the main character never loses, and not having a particular crafting skill or a very high one doesn't seem to really affect anything, which is why I say that some of the mechanics in the story don't seem to really have an impact. They just kind of exist there to show progression, and that's perfectly fine. They're totally viable, but again, they don't really have a huge impact. The other game mechanics in the story, though, are really impactful. That's why I say it's not like it's not LitRPG, it's not gamelet. It just leans a little more to the gamelet side. The are minor survivor elements a little early in the story. Sanity, hunger pulls to maintain, killing monster drops food and crafting components. But the big game mechanic in the story is definitely going to be the crafting, and that's definitely super detailed. Lots of descriptions about how crafting occurs, different materials used, different processes, different incremental steps to create better quality items and different kind of items, and that is probably the part that if you're going to enjoy the story, that's the part you're going to enjoy the most. In the beginning of the story, I'll be honest, crafting was kind of boring and tedious, even to the main character. I think it's part of the reason why I thought it was boring and tedious, because in the description of the story, the main character kind of has the same feeling. Crafting is not the real life realistic version, nor is it fully game-like where you're button pressing. Instead, it's something in between. It has all the tedium of real work, but none of the real challenge. And even the main character kind of describes it as going through all the motions of gathering and crafting, but the process being so simplified that she's guaranteed success, thus losing any real chance of failure or challenge. However, about 70% of the story, this shifts for the better. The main character starts to reason her way out to do things that aren't quite fully prescribed in like the descriptions, and she makes plans and she does things that aren't guaranteed to have success. And I think that's the part I like the most, just because of that aspect. Like, there was a challenge for the main character. Finally, she has to figure things out. She has to go out of her comfort zone to build a camp and to make high grade tools and store resources for a planned trip. And it was just this nice little section of like even the main character's same challenge. And it makes sense that it's at about the 70% mark, because that's the story point where like things are going to be shifting for the main character. But it's just kind of a long way to get there. And I'll admit at this point, again, I like the story. It's just kind of a long wait to kind of get to that point. Story-wise, there isn't one, which is kind of a surprise. There's a setup of the story where the main character can't go home unless she finds some castle and confronts a mysterious them. That's all it's kind of described. It's dwelt upon at length, and I thought it was going to be a bigger part of the story, and it's just not. Instead, after a very long setup and again an intentionally boring tutorial section, it lasts up to about the 40% mark. Most of the story is really just the main character coming to terms with being trapped in a game, fighting monsters, and crafting. That's kind of it, which again, that's not necessarily bad in and of itself for me. I like slice of life stories. I kind of thought this was going to be more of a plot-driven story based on that initial setup. Overall, I almost like this. I really did. There's a boring beginning and middle. Combat is kind of okay. Most of the focus is on crafting, which is it's kind of a plus for me, except the fact that it's described to the main character as boring, so I come across as me, the reader, also in the same light until about, again, the 70% mark, when things shift for the better. Again, at that point, it's a very crafting, reasoning, intelligent main character, planning and being proactive, which I really enjoyed. But then it lost me again at the ending, where everything she did doesn't seem to matter because of a thing that happens. And there really is no resolution for that big plot point that was kind of emphasized at the beginning of the story. You can tell that this is supposed to be book one in the series, and maybe other things are going to be resolved later, but for now, it just kind of felt like this was this weird, petered out ending where she's like, oh, by the way, the stuff that she just did, nope, doesn't really matter. And we're going to move on to the next book into actual plot resolution. I'm like, oh, so this just kind of ends, and it does. That's kind of the way it goes. So for me, it didn't really work. Gets a score 6 out of 10. That's Darkness named Darkness Online book number 1 with a score of 6 out of 10. Okay, folks, so that is it. We are done. Thank you very much for hanging out with me this week. Remember, you can always follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Patreon, and our website at LitRPGpodcast.com, where we have all the back catalog of all the reviews, all 900 plus, I think, that we've done at this point, on LitRPG reviews. So you can find a bunch of good stuff there. We have plenty of tags to each story. If you want to search by those as well, there's also a great way to find new things that you may not have ever read or had a chance to read. I guess there are also a bunch of LitRPG Facebook groups that you can check out to talk to your favorite authors, and to interact with fans and other people looking for good stuff. We have links in the show notes for all those. And if you want to support the podcast and help make sure that it stays free and free of ads, you can find out all the ways to support us at litrpgpodcast.com/support. But again, thank you for hanging out with me this week. I'm glad I was able to get a podcast up and get some reviews. Super tired from Dragon Con. But it's always worth it to talk to you folks and to be a part of your lives. And I thank you for taking the time again to just listen to me. And until we can hang out again, remember to go read some LitRPG. Goodbye, everybody.